So, F above was preparation, the equivalent of prayer, Friday. You prepare for the seventh recording, the seventh day, which is what? Oh, it's communion with God. You stop work. There's no work. Not you, nor your family, nor your servants, nor your animals. It's a Sabbath. You commune. You have family time. You feel the love of God in your life. His provision, His fullness. It's a day for God. Sabbath. That's what the Hebrew emphasis and contribution to mankind has been. To have a 7-day week where the seventh one is crescendo of glory. It says everything about what life is about. The other 6 days were simply to come to God. Why? Because He is. He's all powerful. And He loves us. Made us. Why? To be good company for Him. Why? Because He doesn't want loneliness. He loves communion. Perfect, heavenly company like Himself. Not the same as Himself. Not a pack of drones or clones. But a joyful, loving family of wonderful, mature persons as He is, eternally. Communion, life eternal. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.
Well, dear one, let me read to you what AI most helpfully, I thought, introduces a notion to you. I asked, is there a word like Sabbath that's referring to God? And it says, yes, you're likely thinking of the name Sabayotth, pronounced Sabayotth. Sabayotth. I'd have said Sabayoth, but okay. While it sounds very similar to Sabbath, it has a completely different meaning. I'm not sure AI is quite right there, but still. And origin in Hebrew. Sabaoth. This is a Hebrew title for God, meaning of hosts or of armies. It appears over 250 times in the Old Testament, often as part of the compound name Yahavah Sabaoth, or Jehovah, as there's no such sound as J in Hebrew, but still Jah, which translates to the Lord of Hosts. Well, we think now of heavenly hosts. Sabbath, on the other hand, it says this is the Hebrew word for rest or cessation, referring to the seventh day of the week. Now, understood that this is not AI. This is, marshalling it now. Okay. If you go back to Europe, and especially also, the known world from the European point of view, Asia didn't have the name as such. It was Tartaria, from the Urals to the Pacific Ocean, on the old maps. And whether this was a single state or a confederation of different tribes, and I don't necessarily mean wandering tribes, different groups and ethnic groups and so on. It's not clear. But it seems to have been part of a network that certainly stretched across Asia, and from the way the buildings are in our principal cities, the really old ones, supposedly built somewhere around the end of the not sure, 18th century, I suppose, somewhere around there, or a bit earlier. In fact, seem to go back much further. The technology in the architecture is still quite stunning. Our cathedrals and some of our principal buildings of state and so on. Bridges too. And it seems that the religion then was, well, if you look at the statues in these buildings, they're not Christian. They're pre-Christian in some way, and in particular they seem to centre on King David and a pantheon of biblical type animals, so to speak. In other words, more of a hard to say. Early Hebrew, perhaps, would be best to say, because the religion then was probably adjusting itself from whatever hybrid types of religion it had gained before. There's no question of Jesus being the principal character, and the apostles and scenes from Jesus' life story, parables and miracles and so on. There's none of that at all. No reference at all. It's just not Christian. It's as simple as that. It's something else. And of course, in a sense, it hasn't been obliterated. It's still there in these ancient buildings. Sometimes it's been painted over, and sometimes it's been taken away, of course, or replaced, or added to with something, whatever was seen to be more contemporary in the belief system at the times. But the name of this central figure is the words sabayotth, meaning, as far as we can tell, God the Father, or the King God. You know how Israel was told not to have, in the story, not to have a God. Not to have a king, because they had God as their king. So we see Sabaoth as our king, our God, you see, in such a belief system. And you could think of this as very early Hebrew. Pure, or prior, much prior to what Judaism came to be from it, by whatever historical process brought that about. It's odd, isn't it? Because one thinks of a sort of Catholicism going right back into medieval times and right back to Roman times, as if there was some nice continuity, but not so. And in fact, much of the theology of the Christian Church, not just Catholicism, wasn't particularly evident right back in Roman times either. Obvious things like doctrine of the Trinity and that took I think, a few hundred years to come about. Yeah. Of course, there are claims otherwise. It's not unanimously agreed upon or accepted. In fact, 90% of it is open to conjecture. I say 90%, but a great deal. And how do you quantify it anyway? But it's a way of speaking, isn't it? But isn't it very clear that Sabbath is something like sabayotth? It's a day for God, the Father. Of course, in the modern so-called, remains of the Christian world, what I've disparagingly called decayed Christianity. God has all but slipped out of the picture. He's somewhere in the Trinity along with the Holy Spirit, but the day therefore is ignored, and in fact even officially by the Church in large measure simply switched to Sunday, the Lord's Day, Jesus' Day, the Resurrection Day. It's all about Jesus. Jesus not just disparagingly referred to as the messenger, but now exalted to the position of the full God. You could say the full Godhead includes the other two, but all emphasis is on Jesus, and a particular understanding of Jesus at that, of course, much of which has been fought over by the various denominations and sects. But the seventh day was rest day. Why? Because it was devoted to God. Sabayotth. It's the Sabbath day. Said in the Old Testament to be a sign between me and my people forever. Oh. Of course you can argue, won't any one day in 7 do? You could be right. But you might not be, so it needs to be, in a sense, good reason if you're not going to do it. Otherwise, it seems much more reasonable to keep it, doesn't it? Well, the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, if you practice it for a while, do you find your life is blessed by it? In which case, you'll know the way to go, won't you? Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.